On 31st July 2007, 9-year-old Cédrika Provencher disappeared from Trois-Rivières, Quebec, Canada. It is believed Cédrika was asked by an unknown man to help search for a lost dog. Witnesses said she was last seen riding her bike between 6 and 8 p.m., asking people in her neighborhood if they had seen a lost dog. She was seen leaving a wooded area with her friend and followed by an unidentified man. She was then seen on her bike in a local park and on various nearby streets and was last seen at 8 p.m. by 2 neighbors. When she didn't return home, the girl's parents reported her missing. Police conducted ground searches of areas surrounding Trois-Rivières and eventually found her bicycle leaning against a fire hydrant in the area she was last seen. Hundreds of policemen and citizens assisted in the search using boats and helicopters, but to no avail. An $80,000 reward was offered for any information regarding her abduction. Some people told the police they witnessed her entering a 2004 red Acura TSX. The only other clue was that days before Cédrika was abducted, the same man was reported in the neighborhood trying to get children to help him find his lost puppy. A young girl said the man allegedly offered her $165 to help find his puppy. The girl stated she would be able to recognize the man if she saw his picture, but so far police sketches have been inconclusive. On 11 December 2015, 3 hunters stumbled upon human remains in the woods near Highway 40, which was about 15 kilometers from where Cédrika was last seen. The next day, the remains were confirmed to belong to Cédrika. The only suspect in the case is a man named Jonathan Bettis. Jonathan became a prime suspect in 2007 after his car was found to be similar to that red Acura that was spotted near the scene. In 2007, there were 258 vehicles of that model in the area, but only 6 exactly matched the characteristics that the police were looking for. And out of the 6 owners, only Jonathan wasn't able to provide a strong alibi. He also declined requests to take a polygraph on his lawyer's advice. He was put under surveillance and wiretapping, but police could not find any evidence. In 2016, the police arrested and charged Jonathan with 6 counts of possessing and distributing child pornography. However, the charges were dropped by a judge, calling them a fishing expedition based on intuition or on very hypothetical theory. Jonathan would later file a $10.5 million lawsuit against the police. Jonathan's lawsuit alleges the child pornography charges were concocted without just cause by police as a parallel investigation that would allow them to pin Cédrika's murder on Jonathan. There have been no arrests in the case and Cédrika's murder remains unsolved. Ayla Reynolds was a 19-month-old child from Waterville, Maine, who disappeared on December 16, 2011. Ayla was the daughter of Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro. Justin and Trista split up before Ayla was born, and Ayla would live with her mother most of the time. In 2011, Ayla had been placed temporarily in the home of her father by the Maine Department of Health and Services for 2 months prior to her disappearance. Trista was in a 10-day substance abuse treatment program when her daughter disappeared. On 16 December 2011, Justin put Ayla to bed at his home in Violet Avenue in Waterville, Maine at around 8 p.m. The next morning when Justin went on to check on her, she wasn't there. Ayla apparently vanished during the night and has not been seen since. Justin reported her missing at 8:50 a.m. that morning. According to Justin, the last time he saw Ayla, she was wearing green polka dot pajamas with Daddy's Princess written across them, along with a soft cast on her left arm. Justin's sister and his girlfriend were staying at his house when Ayla disappeared. During the police questioning, both said nothing suspicious happened that night. Justin told investigators his daughter must have wandered away from the house on her own or been abducted in the night. Investigators found blood matching Ayla's DNA in multiple places in Justin's home, including Ayla's bedroom and Justin's bedroom, which is where he slept that night with his girlfriend. Justin's lawyer said that the blood was from when Ayla was sick and was vomiting a lot. Following Ayla's disappearance, a reward of $30,000 for any information leading to her safe return was posted. The reward generated approximately 1,200 leads, but none of them led to any information to Ayla's whereabouts. Ayla's mother said that Justin had a history of abuse whenever Ayla was under his care, and 2 days before she went missing, Ayla's arm was fractured. Justin said that it was an accident. Ayla was declared legally dead in 2017. The court recorded that she had died around the same time that she was reported missing. In December 2018, 7 years after her disappearance, Trista filed a wrongful death suit against Justin. The police believe foul play is involved and that the people in the house that night are withholding information. Justin says he has nothing to do with her disappearance and said that he has no idea where Ayla might be. No one has been named as a suspect in Ayla's disappearance. Her case remains unsolved. Stacy Burns was a 41-year-old mother of 5 and a school nurse living in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. Stacy married Ed Burns in 1992. Ed was a merchant marine and would spend months at a time out at sea while Stacy stayed in Wolfboro along with the children. The relationship between Ed and Stacy was strained, and whenever Ed returned home, tensions would only rise. The Burns live-in babysitter said that Ed was controlling and wanted to know what Stacy was doing at all times, and if she would tell him the truth, he still wouldn't believe that it was the truth. Details in court documents revealed that Ed had threatened to cut off parts of his wife's body, demanded intercourse, burned her clothes as well as her cosmetics, and made derogatory remarks about her in front of others. Stacy also cited an incident in July of 2007 where Ed woke her at 4 a.m. and stood over her saying, "Death before divorce." In August of 2007, Stacy filed for a restraining order against Ed. She also filed for a divorce in September while Ed was out at sea. In December 2008, both were officially divorced. Stacy was granted sole custody of the 5 children. After her death, custody was to be returned to Ed. Sometime after the divorce, Stacy met Jim Whittem while attending her son Michael's hockey games. Both would start dating. Jim was a logger and divorced father of 2 children. Jim eventually fell in love with Stacy, but Stacy wasn't ready for a serious relationship since she had just been through a divorce. Stacy would eventually break up with him, but despite the breakup, they remained friendly. On Sunday, May 10, 2009, on Mother's Day, Stacy's 15-year-old son went to wake up Stacy. He found Stacy's bloodied body in the bed. Police were notified immediately. A medical examination concluded that Stacy died from multiple stab wounds during early morning hours. Stacy and Jim were supposed to meet up with their daughters at a lacrosse game that day. However, when Stacy and her daughter didn't show up, Jim drove to the house to find ambulance and multiple police cruisers. The children broke the news. "Jim, Mom's dead." The police interviewed Stacy's friends and family and questioned them about Stacy's last days before her murder. It was found that 2 days before her death, on Friday, Stacy had met Ed to hand off 3 youngest daughters for the weekend. The 2 oldest children, teenagers Shannon and Michael, were staying in Wolfboro with Stacy. Stacy was apparently nervous about their upcoming court hearing for a contempt of court related to a money dispute stemming from their divorce. However, there doesn't seem to be any arguments between Ed and Stacy on that day. That same evening, Stacy went on a dinner date with a local man. When Stacy returned, she found Jim waiting outside her house. Stacy's date and Jim got into a confrontation. Jim said that he felt that she shouldn't be dating so soon after their breakup. The next day, Stacy's friend said that Stacy felt she had to make it clear to Jim once and for all that they were through. In an interview, her friend said that Stacy had decided to go see Jim that afternoon and to break it off, and I know that she did. On Saturday, 9th May, Stacy's teenage children were having a sleepover with friends. Jim showed up at Stacy's house to watch a movie with Stacy and the kids. Jim said he left around 11 p.m., a detail that the kids present at the Stacy's house confirmed. The following morning, Stacy was found dead. There have been no arrests in the case since. Both Jim and Ed deny any involvement in Stacy's death. Ed said he was at a party in Boston the night of her murder and produced a video to prove his alibi. Wolfboro is about 2 hours' drive from Boston. In 2018, Ed Burns would be arrested for stabbing a man in the back with a 10-inch kitchen knife after an argument. The victim in the case was hospitalized and survived the attack. Police have refused to comment whether Ed Burns is a suspect in Stacy's murder. There have been no leads and no arrests, and her case remains unsolved.
Just a few days before Christmas in 2016, the body of Taylor McAllister was found in an alley off of 63rd Avenue in St. Petersburg, Florida. She was 22 years old when her body was dumped in a grisly state, semi-nude with her t-shirt around her neck, abrasions around her throat and shoulders, and tire tracks across her legs, presumably from the car that had left her there. To this day, no one has been charged with her death. Born July 21, 1994, Taylor is described by her friends and family as having been gregarious, kind, and funny. Blonde-haired and blue-eyed, she had a talent for singing and playing the guitar. She was a performer at heart and would belt out tunes and do dances for her loved ones. She seemed to have the picture-perfect life when she met Joshua, whom she called, quote, the love of her life. They later became parents to beautiful twin daughters. However, the last few years of her life, she succumbed to a terrible drug addiction from the pain medications prescribed to her after childbirth. Her parents recall that, quote, the drugs made her a completely different person. In 2016, Taylor left her family to live with a man named Robert Butler III. According to police reports, she was at his house when she died. Robert Butler III was heir to a Florida carpeting store chain. His late father was the founder of Bob's Carpet and Flooring, which has over a dozen locations in West Florida. Butler, having plenty of money at his disposal, also had an extensive criminal history, including arrests on drug charges and aggravated assault with a firearm. Butler was said to have provided all of Taylor's drugs, keeping her on a short leash and exploiting her addiction, acting as a sugar daddy. Though her parents tried to rescue Taylor from her predicament, her addiction kept her running back to Butler. On December 22, 2016, a man collecting aluminum cans discovered Taylor's body, deceased, behind a home on 63rd Avenue South. There was a long investigation before detectives served a search warrant for the 52-year-old Robert Butler's Palm Harbor home and took him into custody. Taylor's parents allege that Pinellas County prosecutor at the time, Scott Rosenwasser, was friends with Butler's defense attorney, and that this is why he didn't immediately seek a search warrant. This resulted in evidence being lost forever. During the investigation, police named suspected associates, Deontay Baker and Corinne Archer, known as Q. Their statements, and those of Butler's, led to a confusing depiction of events. Butler told St. Petersburg police that he had called friends to help after discovering Taylor sick and half-conscious in his bed. Quote, I didn't know what was going on. These guys said they were going to take her to the hospital. I mean, problem solved. He claims he hadn't called police because he had illegal firearms and drugs in the home. Q. Archer admitted to picking up a, quote, barely conscious McAllister at Butler's Palm Harbor home to take her to the hospital. At some point, he met with Deontay Baker, who confirms that Taylor died shortly after being transported into the truck. Quote, he pulled over and crawled back and said this girl isn't breathing, and that's when everything took a turn. Now the hospital trip changed. Although they stated their intention was to bring her to the hospital, nobody had dressed her, nobody attempted to go to the many hospitals in the area, and nobody dialed 911. It is known that Baker and Archer called Butler, who told them not to bring the body back to the house. In a panic, they dumped her body in an alley. According to witnesses, both the house and the truck were cleaned the next day. Many believe that police had written off the case as a drug overdose, and so were lackadaisical and slow in their preliminary investigation. It was true that Taylor was in a terrible condition due to her addiction. The autopsy results showed hepatitis C, failing liver, and a recent stroke. However, the medical examiner ruled that the 22-year-old woman had died of asphyxia and not drug-related causes. Robert Butler's DNA was found under her fingernails, and he himself had fresh scratches on his face. Yet, no murder charges nor manslaughter charges were ever brought. The only charges related to her murder are 3 counts of failing to report a death, to which Butler and Archer pleaded guilty. Butler served 1 year in jail. Taylor's parents, Bill and Leslie McAllister, are left with the haunting memory of their beautiful, talented daughter and the grave injustice of her murder. On July 23, 1971, a custodian at Washington State University noticed a chunk of carpet missing from the foyer of Stevens Hall. Just a few days later, Joyce LePage, a bright and beautiful young student, was reported missing. Joyce enjoyed a safe and rural upbringing on her family farm near Pasco. She and her siblings were relied on heavily to help out around the farm, performing tasks such as weeding the crops and feeding animals. But they made sure to have ample time for fun as well. Her siblings were her best friends, and they spent the summers sleeping under the stars, swimming in irrigation canals, and biking around their town. At age 21, Joyce, who was always bright and ambitious, started taking summer classes at WSU. She was a tall woman at 5'9", and attractive with an athletic build and long, light brown hair. She was beloved by friends and colleagues, and considered to be a brilliant and prolific writer. Her family believed she'd become an educator and follow a career in academia. She was fun-loving and adventurous, and she had recently begun taking skydiving lessons. The day of her disappearance, Joyce was scheduled for her first solo jump. She also had classes that day and was planning to go home to Pasco to see the boat races for the weekend. She never made it to her lessons or to the races. Joyce was not the type to miss appointments, so immediately her family knew something was wrong. It wasn't until 9 months later, in April of 1972, that a teenage boy was on a hike in the Wawaway Canyon and discovered Joyce's body in the ravine. Heavily decomposed and covered in thick brush, her remains were wrapped in several carpets, one of which was later determined to be the missing carpet from Stevens Hall. Some people believe this is where Joyce must have been killed. At the time, Stevens Hall, a women's dormitory, was uninhabited and under renovation. According to friends, Joyce often snuck into the old empty building through an unlocked window. She would play the dorm's baby grand piano, study, and occasionally spend the night in the rooms. Rosie Lord, a custodian for the hall, believed that on the night of her disappearance, Joyce had attended a party at Stevens. There were pizza boxes and drug paraphernalia left in the empty building the next morning. However, no one could verify her presence at the party that night. Despite severe decomposition of her body, a forensic analysis of her remains found 3 knife wounds to her ribs, which were determined as the cause of death. She had been wrapped in 2 military blankets before being wrapped in the carpet and transported to the ravine. Some suspect that Ted Bundy, the infamous serial killer, had been involved, given that Joyce was the type of victim Bundy would target, an attractive university student with long brown hair, and that Bundy had been murdering women in the Northeast Pacific at that time. However, Sheriff Brett Myers contends that the attack seemed personal and was likely someone who knew her. There was only one major suspect that investigators spoke to. According to police, this person was cooperative and took a polygraph, and so was cleared of all suspicions. While some chalk up Joyce's murder to a university ghost story, Joyce's brother, Bruce LePage, is still looking for information regarding her murder and has offered a $100,000 reward for a conviction. Joyce LePage's murder remains the oldest active cold case in Whitman County, Washington.